What's up, everybody? I'm Fernando Mastrangelo, and welcome back to Design Discord. Today, I'm sitting with Louis Wexler of Wexler Gallery. Louis got his start at Christie's and then worked for the famous DiLorenzo Gallery until him and his wife, Sherri, opened their gallery in 2000 in Philadelphia. Since then, they've been trailblazing. They've been really at the center of collectible design, mixing different genres, showing experimental furniture, studio furniture, glass, fine art. They've really been kind of putting their hands in all the different areas. Today we sit down, we talk about the history of the gallery, how he got started, and it was a really fun conversation. So let's jump in. Louis Wexler, thank you for coming to Design Discord.
Thank you for having me. My first podcast ever.
First podcast ever?
Yeah,
I'm honored.
Very exciting.
So you have a pretty awesome history. I mean, I did a lot of deep dive into your career, and so I of course want to start Christie's in the 1980s, obviously also where you met Sherri, your wife and business partner.
Yep.
And you were vice president of the 20th Century Decorative Arts?
Assistant vice president.
Assistant vice president, okay.
Started out the front counter and
you did?
worked my way up.
So what was that like? And so for people who don't know, because not everyone's an expert, like what is 20th Century Decorative Art?
So that was essentially more or less what design is today. So back in the 80s, the big kind of titans, to use your word, of design was Tiffany, Gallet, Dome, Lalique, Majorelle, Prouvé, Perrion, Roman. Those were the big names. And it was, 20th century decorative arts, then it became 20th century decorative arts. And
now, is strictly mostly furniture, or there's also objects, fine art in that, or no fine art? No fine art.
There was a very, back in the day, there was a real fine line between what was design or craft and contemporary art. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest difference today is those have, to use a cliche, but those lines are blurred, and that's what makes things so exciting and interesting. But, back in the day, that didn't exist. It was very, very separate. Mm-hmm. And
why do you think that was?
This whole world didn't even exist. Don't forget, design is such a young, discipline now, market. It was old school dealers and it was old school collectors, and it was just a whole different scene.
And so then talk to me about what exactly went on at Christie. I mean, obviously auction house. And so what were your responsibilities? What were you guys doing?
So I guess, maybe I should start with how I wound up there.
Yeah,
it's
please.
Kind of a good story. We touched
please. I
upon
love it. Yeah. We did.
So, a guy like me is not normally somebody you would find at Christie's. My mom was a school teacher. My dad owned an optical shop. And I grew up on the south end of Long Island. So I was going to school to be a labor lawyer, studied labor relations in school, but I minored in studio art. And before I went to law school, I went to work for a recruiter just to get some experience. The job came up at the front counter Christie's. And I was like, all right, this is cool. I didn't even really know, quite honestly, what Christie's totally was. I knew it was an auction house, and it was fancy, but that's all I knew. Because don't forget, there was no internet. You couldn't search things back in those days. So I went on to interview myself, and I remember meeting Francois Curiel, who was the head of the jewelry department. And I'm talking to him, and he's reading my resume. At the same time, he's reading his birthday cards because it was his birthday, asking me very important questions like, what do my parents do? And, do they collect art? And what do they collect? To
understand your pedigree? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And you're like, no.
And I'm like, yeah, dude, they're teachers and, own an optical shop. They're not collectors. And as he's talking to me, he's folding up my resume. And at the end of the interview, he hands it back to me, and it's literally the size of a chiclet. And he puts it in the palm of my hand, and he says, thank you for coming. And I'm like, all right, that's the end of that. Miraculously, I get a second interview with Fritz Hatton, who's the head of operations at the time. And he's talking like we're talking now. And all of a sudden, he slams his hands down on the desk. And once again, I don't react because I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? And I wanted to see how you'd react if you were at the front counter and somebody got angry. Obviously, it didn't affect you. And then miraculously,
You're hired.
I'm hired. And partially it was because my parents took me to museums. I grew up in New York, Long Island, like I said, but they went to Manhattan. They took me to museums at an early age. So we started at, Arms and Armor at the Met, and then, Museum of Natural History. And then we went to the King Tut exhibit. And then the big exhibit was Picasso. And we went to that. So I loved art, and I loved everything surrounding that. We'd go to the windows during Christmas time in Manhattan, and I loved those windows. So I always just had a personal passion. So when they were asking me art questions at these interviews, I was able to answer them. And I think they were intrigued by somebody with my background who knew a lot about art. And that I owe to my parents, because they really pushed me.
Although that didn't move you to think, oh, maybe I should enter this field? Like, go and study law?
I didn't think you could make any money in this field, which technically
was true, maybe.
The old joke, how do you walk away with $1 billion in the art world? You start with 2.
I never heard that. That's a good one.
Yeah, so that's why I never did it. My parents actually pushed me because, I drew and I painted and I did all, I was very artistic as a kid. And in my head, I was like, well, I want to go beyond that, so I want to make money. So that's why I didn't even think about it. And then here was Christie's, and it was the combination of art and business. And, it just opened up a world to me that there's no way in a million years I ever would have thought that would have been open to me. Things like, going up to the chairman's room and seeing Van Gogh's Dr. Gachet, which at the time was the most expensive painting, and being as far from it as I am to you.
Wow.
The security guard saying, close your eyes, open your palms up, open your eyes, and I'm holding the second world's largest diamond in the palm of my hand. Wow. Things like that I never thought I'd experience in my entire life, and here I am experiencing these things. It was pretty remarkable.
And so then, of course, you really cut your teeth in like what auctions are all about. I assume. Did you start to like really learn about the auction markets at that?
Oh, I learned so much. I mean, because I was exposed to things.
Well, what was the auction markets like then? I mean, maybe not compared to now, but like I know it's probably really different. But what were collectors seeking or auctioning at that time?
Sure. So it was a different world, the auction world, than it is now. The collectors at that time were really the Japanese. They were creating their own private museums, like Seibu and some other museums, in department stores. So the top floor of the department stores was their own private museums. And they were voraciously buying Tiffany and Gale and Doman and Leek and all the people that we were, just talking about earlier. And they were that was the superstar of the auction world then, especially Tiffany. They were huge buyers of Tiffany.
And I wonder, it was probably because of the rise of Japan's wealth at that time. I mean, right? Exactly.
The Nikkei was taking off. Everything was golden, and they were buying blindly too. Like they were just buying whatever they could, and it was an interesting time, and it was good for me because the dealers at that time were more people like me. They were kind of guys who, maybe their families, like my families, grew up in like the Grand Concourse or the South Bronx, and they moved out to the suburbs, and they were traders essentially. They were literally dealing in Tiffany and Lalique. They had great knowledge, but they didn't come from pedigrees either. And that was kind of my sweet spot at Christie's, because I could relate to them and they could relate to me. So Nancy McClelland, who was my boss at the time, she wasn't of that world. So I was kind of the intermediary, the conduit between Christie's and these dealers. And it was a very dealer-driven market. So dealers would be buying and selling at auction. But now I think the auction houses compete with the dealers a little more because it's a global market. There's more access. But back in the day, it was a different kind of game.
So how long was your tenure there?
I was there for 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
And then do you go to DiLorenzo?
So then Tony calls me up on the phone And
because people who don't know Tony, I also have a funny story about Tony because
share, please.
In 2014, when I first launched my company, I showed at Salon in 2014 with DiLorenzo because my business partner at the time had a relationship with them. And, you know, I make very super contemporary stuff. But they showed it at Salon in 2014. And I remember, because I wasn't really familiar with the market at that time. And I remember a few people saying to me, whoa, what a interesting choice to show with DiLorenzo. And I was like, yeah, I guess, I don't know. You know, I didn't really know what that meant. And then, you know, later being able to kind of understand his position in the market and kind of like, you know, French Deco and our French Deco and stuff like so like and a power dealer in that sense, but not so much in the contemporary realm. So anyway, it was interesting, but we didn't end up working together long term, but that was my first major show.
And that's probably where I first saw the work, honestly.
Probably
Adriana,
at his booth.
I think, Adriana was showing it.
Yes,
and it's
Adriana.
so funny getting back to that because sometimes what you don't know helps you along the way.
Totally.
Totally.
Because that's a prestigious thing.
You would have been intimidated maybe, or
1,000%.
And I think that's both of our careers in a lot of ways is what we don't know has helped us, you know, throughout our careers.
So he calls you and says,
hey, Lou, I'm looking for somebody for, you know, my uptown space on Park Avenue. If you know of anybody, you know, let me know. Well, for me, that was like an opportunity.
Yeah,
so
for
I
sure.
said, Buddy, what about me? And he said, yeah, great. But you can't tell Nancy that I called you. You have to tell Nancy. Nancy McClellan was the head of the department at the time. You can't tell her that because they were friends.
Yeah.
And I don't want her to perceive that you're, you know, that I'm stealing you.
Yeah, stealing, yeah.
So anyway, so I did that. And then when we met to negotiate terms, I'll never forget this. So we're sitting in the back of his town car and he's across from me. And he says, okay, here's a pen and paper. Write down your salary. Now I'm making $17,000 a year at Christie's. I can't even afford to eat half the time.
Yeah, that's like, with inflation, that's like, I don't know,
I
50 grand today or something.
I literally lived off of hot dogs and conditions from the stand. And the funny part was when I went out with like my friends from Christie's who were way more wealthy than I was, like, and then it became my turn to pay.
Yeah.
I literally couldn't afford to eat. My friends at Warren Christie's friends took mercy on me.
That's so messed up.
Anyway, so yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, so so he meets with me. He hands me a piece of paper and a pen, and he says, "Write down your salary." So I'm like, "What the hell do I do here?" So I think I wrote down some crazy number, and he looks at it, and he looks at me, and he rips up the piece of paper, and he says, "This is what you're getting paid. Take it or leave it." And I was like, "I'll take it," and that was it, and that changed my life.
Really?
And I saw him negotiate that way other times when people were negotiating for pieces, and he'd say, well, write down what you want to pay for it. And then he would rip it up.
That's
and
hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of his trades. You should do that nowadays.
It's funny. I tried so many Tony DiLorenzo things.
Did you?
And realized very quickly, I am not Tony DiLorenzo. I'm not that guy.
So how does that start to inform, because you move from the auctions to then dealing, right? To that world of like really selling the stuff. And their focus is really French Deco, right?
Yep.
And so were you familiar with that, having worked at
Christie's? I was familiar with it through Christie's. But I didn't know the marketplace in depth, but you're around it. And you see it every day. And Tony's actually a really great teacher, that you learned about it, so you learn the ins and outs and the in-depth. He didn't give you all the secrets and all the information. He kept things still close to his vest on a lot of things, but you still just learned a tremendous amount. And, I don't think I'd be where I am today if it wasn't for both Nancy McClellan to Christie's and Tony DiLorenzo. And Tony, a lot of great dealers came out of Tony's program. Christina Garhalis, as you know.
Yes.
Liz O'Brien.
Yeah.
Alberto Aquilino, 1950. Adriana. And even All Directions Moving, which is, at the time, the driver for Tony. Tony put him into business to become a shipper. So, I think we all owe him a lot of gratitude.
Yeah. I also started to notice that, like, 20th century decorative arts, French Art Deco, there is a relationship there with collectible design in a way, in the sense that they were pushing materials, unique, limited edition stuff, right, at that time period. So that model kind of feels like it started there. Is that fair to say?
I agree with you 100%. I think it was really an interesting time in the history of design. I think, there were artists that were collaborating. So you had, Roman doing the furniture, Dunant doing the lacquer, Edgar Brandt doing the metalwork. It was very limited in production, and it went to incredibly wealthy individuals who, were, enjoying having that work and living with it. So yeah, there's definitely a lineage. Right. I think that's what my gallery is all about.
I would agree. I was, realizing your history. I really, that's kind of where I wanted to move to, is like, so you cut your teeth at Christie's, then you do DiLorenzo, you get all this, but then you guys decide to leave Manhattan and move to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And open Wexler. Now, something also interesting I found was that, I'd love to talk about it, but it's like something called studio furniture, studio craft is what you were essentially kind of showing, mixed with French design, glass, ceramics, furniture, and art at that point, right?
It was a great time.
Yeah, but studio furniture kind of came up as this, something I didn't know about. It essentially is the precursor to Collectible, and maybe it was what.
Absolutely.
So where, first of all, like, that term kind of just got lost, and then Collectible just became what took over. But, like Wendell Castle was a studio furniture artist.
Albert Paley.
Yeah. Which I wanted to talk to you about Peter Joseph, who nobody really knows about. You've talked about him because he was kind of an important character at one point in the 90s, essentially showing studio furniture. He dies in 1998, and you guys see that as a little bit of a gap in the market, right? And is that what sort of helps Wexler Gallery?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Let me jump in really quickly.
Yeah,
too.
no, please. I want you to tell it.
But also, I said, my gallery. Whenever I say my gallery, it is our gallery.
Your gallery, of course.
It's my
Sherri,
wife.
Of course.
And
yes.
So I don't want to get yelled at.
Okay.
But
that's good.
But yeah, so I was going to all these craft shows, and I saw all these woodworkers and makers from Vermont or Maine, and they'd show their wares and they would disappear. And I'm like, okay, nobody's showing this work on a regular basis. Maybe I should start doing that. And then that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of, okay, well, there's some people that are really doing museum quality work. And, what is that about? And then that led me to Peter Joseph, Pridham and Eames, Naga Gallery, all the galleries that were kind of the founding members of the studio, furniture movement.
Yeah. Interesting.
And once again, that ignorance is bliss kind of philosophy. Peter wasn't showing anymore because he had passed away. And I was like, and these artists weren't showing a lot of places.
Yeah,
so
Albert Paley also was kind of like, you said that, it was kind of like they didn't have regional representation at that point.
That's correct. Yeah. So I was like, here's an opportunity, because that's what I do. If I look for opportunities. And I went to RISD and I met with all of them, not Wendell and Albert, but all the RISD people like Roseanne Somerson, Alphonse Mattia, John Dunnigan, all the top designers from that school, that era and that area. And, we sat at a long table and they beat the shit out of me. I mean, what are you going to do for us? Do we get stipends?
Really?
They were, and I'm in my, early 30s, late 20s. And,
right.
And I'm like, whoa, didn't expect this. And, I worked my way through it all, and we had a conversation, and then, I started representing all of them. And then once I started representing them, then I met Wendell, and he came on board. And then Albert Paley's mother was living in Philadelphia, so he would come visit her, and he stopped in and he came on board. And then we got Chihuly. That was our first show, actually.
You did a lot of secondary market with Chihuly, or you did?
I did. You know, but at that point we were actually showing it straight from Chihuly's
Oh, really? Cool.
studio. And so all of a sudden, you know, this is the route I'm taking, along with showing work from Tony, which was Prouvé and Perrion.
Oh, you were.
And mixing up the contemporary glass with Lalique, Dôme, Gallet.
Right.
And, you know, so kind of mixing the old and the new. And this was something nobody was doing.
Right. That's what kind of distinguished. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it carries through your program today, you know. Yeah.
Maybe it's ADD. I don't know. But I can't, you know, concentrate on one medium or one thing. And I like the lineage and the history. You know, so I think without one thing, there isn't something else.
So you weren't really like looking at the marketplace so much and saying, oh, what can I do this? It just sort of happened organically, or was it through the artists that you were meeting? Or?
It was a combination of both. I think it was a lot of it was organic. And then a lot of it was just seeing holes in the marketplace that weren't being filled and saying, you know, hey, you know, here's an opportunity. Let's do it. And looking at that time, you know, programs that existed like Peter Joseph that kind of faded away, and picking up the torch and carrying it, you know, forward. And that's really how it all kind of came about.
I would assume that Philly is controversial in terms of moving a gallery there, especially when you're working with someone like Wendell or, you know, Albert Paley. Talk to me a little bit about was there pushback with that, or were you guys, because it was, did you guys kind of own that territory in a way? Like it was, or what was the response to?
I mean, look, it's always been, you know, a little bit of boxing with one hand tied behind your back, or, you know, I used to say, you know, it used to be like dancing in high heels backwards, but my daughter would say, Dad, how old are you? Nobody gets that reference. So yeah, I mean, being in Philly was always, and it still is, challenging. Was there pushback? No, because I think a lot of the artists were just so happy to get representation, and they were happy to get representation from a dealer who was, you know, honest and believed in the work and cared about them and, you know, wanted to see the work get to the next level, that I think they were okay showing in Philly. And plus, Philly has this great history in especially studio furniture. So, you know, I think
we'll talk a little more about that. Like, how so?
Well, you've got Wharton Esherick. You know, you've got Dan Jackson. You've got, you know, even Roseanne and Alphonse. They all went to school in Philly. Michael Horowitz. So there's always been this really strong craft component of Philadelphia. And, you know, because you have the universities there where a lot of the now, you know, major players, you know, or at that time, cut their teeth in those universities. So there's a tie to Philadelphia. So I didn't get a lot of blowback from a lot of people.
Gotcha.
I did get some blowback when we started to show paintings. And then people were like, well, why would we show in Philly? And I got a lot of, you know, attitude.
Yeah, you have an interest also. You've even taken some time off to like really focus on art stuff, right? So, like, talk a little bit about how that works, because you're showing Chuck Close at one point,
I mean, the two of the signature shows we did back in the day were, you know, Wendell Castle and Chuck Close.
Yeah.
And we did, and everybody's like, what?
Yeah.
But it made sense because we paired it with at that time, you know, Wendell was doing these, you know, very gold leaf, very colorful pieces. And we combined the colors that you would find in those Chuck Close prints with the colors that you would find in Wendell's work. And it was a really monumental and I think super important show that got completely unnoticed, but it was a major show. And then I said, okay, let's take it one step further because that's what I do. And then we showed Picasso prints with Wendell. And once again, people were like, what? But, you know, we teamed up with John Zucchi, who's probably one of the greatest, you know, experts on Picasso prints in the world. And we use the shapes and the imagery and the forms in the prints to play off of Wendell's furniture. And it made sense. So yeah, I've always kind of played with the paintings world and the design world. It's just the paintings world is a tough world. And I don't know if I have the stomach for it.
Why? Was it? Like you're talking about the primary,
secondary.
Oh, secondary.
Yeah, I mean it's a rough market. I mean it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
Honesty doesn't seem to be
Right.
one of the top components of people involved in that. The numbers are huge. It's just a very different kind of. You have to have a different kind of makeup, and I don't think I have that makeup.
Like a Ingo Philbrick kind of vibe, yeah.
Bingo, and that's not me. You know, I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
But I still, so I spent a year, studying it, knowing the market, learning about it, and I, I was proud of the fact that I have a pretty strong knowledge base in that, that market as well. It's just I don't deal with it. I still deal with it, but very quietly.
Right. Do you deal with it in design? Because I've been curious about how that relationship between, working at the auction house, working at this kind of high-end level, and how that's informing your program. Even in 2000, when you're showing you open the gallery, you start showing these. Are you thinking about how they're going to get positioned in their career to eventually be auctioned or in the auction markets? Because that really starts to establish the designer's market value. Right. There's primary market value, but secondary is where it's at.
It is, and I think that's the downfall of collectible design on a certain level.
Well, I've been keeping track of the auction markets, and it seems like decent-ish,
but it could be so much better. And I think part of that is, does it inform my decision making? Not really, to be honest. I mean, what deforms my decision making is basically, does the artist are they doing something that's just wow to me? Mm-hmm. When I look at it, I'm like, this has never been done before. I haven't seen this. This is important. This needs to be shown. People need to see it. And it's a very visceral reaction. And then I'm passionate about getting works into museums. And then from museums, then I'm thinking broader market. But those are my kind of pillars. It's no different than when I first, quite honestly, saw your work. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anybody doing this before. And it blew me away.
Thank you.
I saw it at a Collectible Design.
Yep. And Collective.
Everybody does that.
I know. Now
Sorry,
I get confused
Lerner.
too, by the way. I know. Steve, he probably hates it.
And I tried to sign you, actually.
Yep.
To last.
I was too hard-headed back in the day. I wanted to stay independent.
And that's okay too, and that's what you run into when you try to sign, young artists, because they're not fully developed and don't know where they want to be or who they are. And sometimes you do run into the attitude of, I work my ass off. Why am I giving you 50% of my hard work?
Yeah, I think there's two minds. Some people can manage running their studio and all the stuff that goes along with that. And I think there's, other minds that don't want to focus on that. They just want to be in the studio doing their, their hard work. Yeah.
And you were, you were kind of a superstar, and still are, but it was really like, I got it,
Yeah. Do you think that the part of it is that you seek sort of like innovation in material use? Like that seems to be something that you...
Very important to me.
Yeah.
Like
Nick is a great example. I mean,
Nick Missel's a great example. I mean, Faiza, who's using Meerschaum, in her lighting, which nobody, really knows about outside of Turkey, but it's a mineral that's found in Turkey. I think that's what makes things kind of interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Innovative use of materials, whether it's new technology or existing technology, rich materials, and just that wow factor, like, okay, I've never seen this before. Now, that doesn't mean that these are easy sells, because they're not, but I think they're important that they're seen.
How do you approach representation of an artist? Like, take us through a little bit of, you get the wow factor, you approach them, then how does that relationship start and build? I mean, you've had some artists on your roster for a very long time, like Gula.
Yeah.
There's been some people that you've really brought up. Jomo.
Yeah, Jomo. I mean, he's in 15 museums now.
Exactly. Like you guys crushed it with it.
Yeah. And,
Roberto.
when I represented him, I put him, I helped put him on the map.
You did, yeah.
So to speak. Look, we see it, I'm very reactive. So let's take Jomo, for example.
Okay.
So, he had one piece at the Afrofuturistic show at the Met. And I saw it there because Rob had a piece there as well. And we went to the opening, and I filed it away. And then he went to the Philadelphia Museum because they were thinking of purchasing a piece. And he was talking to the curator there saying, I can't find representation. I've gone to everybody and nobody's, interested in my work. And she said, well, did you go to Lou? I said, no. So go to Lou. He's a great guy. And literally when I met him in the office, I signed him on the spot and said I would show your work at Design Miami. And he looked at me like, you're insane. But that's how I react. It's like falling in love, you just fall hard and you just know. Maybe it's that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours where you've just seen totally. So much.
That's right.
But yeah, so, the process is basically falling in love with the work. Now I'm at a stage in my career where I have to like the person who's making the work because I've spent so much time dealing with artists that were successful in my gallery, but were just so difficult and so hard that I don't want to.
What makes an artist difficult in your view?
Screaming at you,
Okay.
threatening to pull pieces the 11th hour.
Wow.
Just bad behavior that I think anybody would feel was bad behavior, whether in the art world or not in the art world. And sometimes you tolerate things, especially earlier in your career, because you quite honestly need the financial resources and you need the money. And if they're a great selling artist, you
stick with it.
You stick with it. And then you hit a point where you're like, okay, money is important, but it's not the end all be all.
Right.
My mental health is important.
Right.
My physical health is important. And you kind of,
at this stage, you can really, decide. I did want to go back a little bit to, because the gallery starts in 2000, but you guys start to hit the fair circuit pretty hard at, early on. Or not early, I mean, I guess when does that really start for you guys? Because you guys are like, and I thought I made the relationship that like, because you're in Philly, you want to kind of be able to build the program internationally and all that. So you that was kind of the thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts of like, how the fairs have really changed your business or increased it or,
Yeah, I mean, the fairs, especially being in Philadelphia. I mean, now we have the space in New York, but when we were just in Philly, it was important because you needed the exposure for your artists and for you as a gallery. So you had to do those shows. So, we started doing SOFA in Chicago because we were at one point, once again, we've been through so many different, incarnations, the gallery. We were the leading secondary market dealers in contemporary glass, probably in the world at one point. So SOFA was a natural show. And we were doing that fair for a while until, I realized and Sherri realized the glass market was on the verge of collapse because everybody bought a tremendous amount of work at a certain period of time, and then they were all aging out, and it was just flooding the market. And there weren't enough buyers.
Right.
So,
And were prices just getting astronomical or something? Or the
prices were high, but it was just they were aging out. So basically the bottom line is when you have an increased supply and limited demand, where do prices go? So it was just, I saw the writing on the wall and we kind of shifted more heavily into design. But it started out with SOFA. Then I had the hardest time, quite honestly, getting into Design Miami because I had done SOFA and they didn't want me in Design Miami. There may have been some other nefarious reasons, who knows?
Okay.
But, look, you never know.
Was that, you think that because the program was, at that time, was it still mixed? Because I feel like there's been a gravitational pull towards kind of collectible in your gallery, more towards this experimental furniture.
Right.
So, could it have been partially that they saw you as kind of mixed between different eras?
Yeah, a little bit, but that, and I never saw that as being a bad thing.
Right, of course not. Now it's celebrated.
Right. And that's the irony of it.
Yeah, that is
that I was doing this literally in 2000.
Right.
But yeah, I think, and also craft was a dirty word.
It was a dirty word. I know it's gotten blown. Now it's like everybody wants to be craft.
It's okay. Yeah, it's great.
It's great.
And I think that was part of what was holding me back from Design Miami was they're saying, okay, you're a craft gallery and we don't want that in Design Miami. At that time, it just wasn't a thing.
Sure.
So
these were the first couple of years.
Yeah.
It was like,
I mean, so Steve Lerner was the one who really, that was my first like design fair.
You started year one with him?
Yeah. And he was rough on me a little bit, but I
remember that fair so well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's what it really helped my career in terms of sales and getting exposure too. That was but
it was amazing to watch it because I actually was the booth across from you when you did the big couch.
The big sofa.
Yeah. And that's when I realized, fuck, I'm the old guy now, because I'd look over there and there'd be all these beautiful people on the sofas, and they were all young and they were all amazing and fabulous. And, there was me and Sherri, and we're like, oh man, I'm not that anymore. But yeah, I mean, that was a turning point for you. And honestly, it was a turning point for me. And then we did the salon.
And then salon, right.
And that was even a bigger turning point. And then finally it was Design Miami.
When you say, okay.
And then Fog, and then Expo Chicago, and then.
Did you see a substantial difference in the business as you did those fairs over the years?
Absolutely, because we needed that exposure, and the only way you're going to get it by not being in New York is doing the fairs. And also the artists start demanding it too.
Right. That's what I wanted to. Yeah, of course.
And then that gets tricky because when I was doing Design Miami, I wanted to have one piece from every artist in the booth. I felt that was the right thing to do because I'm always more worried about everybody else and not enough about myself. Yeah. And then there was the issue of, well, it's too crowded in there, Lou. Nobody can see anything, there's too much competing going on. So I'm like, okay, now we're going to highly curate the booths, which was the smartest thing we ever did. But then the artists that are left out, then they're upset because they're not in the booth. So, so basically as a dealer, you're not going to win no matter what. And it took me a while, but we figured out we got to do what's best for the gallery and what's best for the individual artist at that time and what flows in the booth. So we really curated it. And I think that was a turning point. And yeah, there's artists that are going to be upset with me because they're not in this year. And if they're not in one year, we do our best to try to get them into the booth in another year. But, we do the best we can to make people happy. And that was a big lesson in my life too. I always wanted to make everybody happy. And I realized I'm not tequila or pizza and I can't make everybody happy. So we do what we think is best for the gallery and what's best for the individual artists at the end of the day.
Yeah, and probably there's times that there's more momentum around other people and you want to, you need to show that we're new stuff. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. New stuff. I mean, cause that Jomo example, like I just knew, once again, completely visceral. But I liked him and I liked the work.
What year was that? Was that 2017-ish?
Something like that.
Yeah. And when did you start Design Miami? Was that... Do you remember your first year?
I don't. I'm so bad with dates. I'm just not my. Sherri would know.
Sherri would know.
She's
like, oh yeah, we did it.
Yeah, and it cost this much.
Yeah, that's interesting. I tried to get into Design Miami as an independent, and that was impossible. They would just never let you in. So I think they've been pretty particular. But now, once you're in their ecosystem, that's it, right? It's over.
It seems like it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say it never, because I was in Fog's ecosystem, and then
not.
Yeah.
Fog is an interesting fair because it really mixed art and design, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. They're out of San Francisco.
Yeah. And it's a good fair. I mean,
it's a good fair.
It was also just expensive to ship everything out.
Oh my
there.
God, yeah. I can
and
imagine.
that's the problem with fairs. I mean, fairs are just so
are you finding because
expensive?
Now you do basically Salon and Design Miami, right?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's obviously because those are showing you that's where you get the most bang out of your buck.
Yeah. I mean, we actually were invited to do Basel this year.
Basel?
Basel. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. At first I thought it was like a scam email.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Wait, so what?
But we didn't do it. We're not doing it
right.
because we just don't have a program that's strong enough for that.
They thought so.
Yeah, but we already committed to Design Miami, and honestly,
I see. Instead of Design Miami.
Well, it'd be really hard to do both.
Yeah,
I did that once. I mean, I did Design Miami and Art Miami.
Yes.
That nearly killed me.
Okay.
You know what it's like going across the causeway back and forth? Yeah. I mean, that was just a day in itself. So, and financially, we're just not in that place.
Yeah. That's also, it's an insane endeavor to do.
But it was an honor. You know, it was pretty cool to get that email.
Well, it's interesting that's where they're thinking about that, about starting to bring. Now, were they trying to look for design works to be shown?
Didn't really get that specific, and I didn't go that
Gotcha.
deep into it because I just, it was so hard for me to just ignore the email and not go for it. But
Sherri's like, no.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that wasn't even a discussion. But I really think that also the fairs are there's a change in the fairs, and I think they're looking for new blood also in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of people are dropping out of fairs too, because it's just so expensive. And when you do a cost benefit analysis, you've got to really make sure that you're getting as big a benefit as you would hope from the amount of cost that the fair is eating you up.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about it in design. It's hard to. You're not making sales on the floor, so it is. So you got to think about it, like, is this fair paying off 6, 7, 8, 10 months later, a year later, 2 years later?
And that's the big change too. The big change was when, back in the day, people would buy off of the floor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I think that's less and less now. Now it's a whole lot of this, picture taking, then they go back, they review it, they review with their interior designer or their art consultant. They look at the hundreds of photographs they've taken, and then they kind of whittle it down into who they want. And then that could even be 2 years down the road, because let's say you're building a home and, that project.
Oh, we deal with this all the time. There's sometimes that an inquiry from 2 years ago will finally hit. And I'm like, oh yeah, that thing, that project. Oh yeah, I can't even, and it's wild to see how that happens. But.
Yeah. And then sometimes the project is massive for you or for me. And then all of a sudden, there's overruns in, construction costs, and all of a sudden you watch that whittle down too. But, it's interesting.
How do you deal with like the artist, the artists kind of need constant commissions and inflows of things like that, right? So in those cycles, when you're starting to work with an artist, how do you guys manage those cycles of like, artist that needs capital or something to get through a project, but the momentum of the sales are not there yet? Like, how do you guys manage those time periods, and what do the artists say to you in those time periods?
It's extremely difficult, because this is not like you're making a widget and you're selling a widget and it's a production line. As there's feasts and there's famines, and it's a very difficult field. And we take all of this so seriously, and probably way too personally. But yeah, it's hard when they're relying on you for their livelihood and it's just not happening, because it's a process. So, I mean, you encourage them, you explain to them the economics of it, you explain to them the situation, you commiserate with each other, because we're both in the same boat. At the end of the day, if I'm not selling, I'm not making money either.
Right, but you guys have enough, there's enough artists on there where you can kind of ride different waves, or I assume, I don't know.
You can to a certain extent, but sometimes when the market's bad, you know? And also, our overhead is
obscene.
Crazy. I mean, so.
Yeah, I want to get to your 11,500 gallery, my museum, I want to call it.
But yeah, no, I mean, so the point you're taking, it's tough,
Yeah.
because sometimes it doesn't hit right away, or sometimes somebody doesn't hit at all.
Years, or it doesn't hit at all, right?
And once again, in the old days, I was so incredibly committed to everybody that I would stick with an artist for 20 years and sometimes, sell like 4 pieces. And then
Crazy.
It is crazy. And then I realized I'm not doing them a favor. I'm not doing me a favor.
Right.
It's just not the right way to do it. So we did a kind of a purging at one point also, and brought in, different artists, and really started to bring in artists from Europe too. Once again, with tariffs, it was a really good timing. But and bring them overseas. Because, I think...
How are you discovering talent over there?
Once again, it's either people approaching us, or, we did deep dives into Instagram, Pinterest, believe it or not.
Yep. Do you go to the fairs abroad?
Not as much as we should, because,
yeah, you're busy.
I'm busy, and and I'm look, I'm on the back nine now.
Come on, brother. Come on.
But
your artists don't want to hear that.
But we've got a great staff, and we've hired some really amazing talent very recently. So they're the ones who are doing the traveling. Because quite honestly, it's still in a lot of ways it's a young person's game, and other collectors and young dealers and young collectors and young artists want to hang out with.
Yeah,
they don't want to hang out with the 61-year-old guy who wants to go to bed by 11. So
dude, that's late. I'm a 9:30 guy.
Well, truth be told, when Sherri's not with me at the fairs, like if I'll go to Miami by myself, I'm up till like 4 a.m.
Oh,
but
really?
She's the voice of reason, who's like, we've got to work tomorrow, you've got to go to sleep, and you're not Keith Richards, and you're not 22 years old anymore. But anyway, the feast or famine with the artist, it's a process, and that's probably for me the hardest part of representing an artist, is just getting them over that hump, and getting having them have the patience so that it does happen.
Right.
It's hard, and and they know it. I mean, we work so fucking hard to make things happen that I think, everybody's a little tolerant because they know it's not for lack of trying. And I also, in my head, I always feel like I'm not doing enough. We could always be doing more, and that could drive you a little insane, but
Do you feel like you're really liaisoning with them, like with the artists? Are you involved deeply in their practices of like what's going on a monthly, weekly basis with them, or?
I try to be. I actually this year I did a thing where I'm going to call every artist every like 2 weeks or so, and then I realized that, well, now all I'm doing is just speaking to artists, because my conversations can last 3 hours with an artist sometimes. Sure. But, I do my best, and if I'm not doing it, then there's other people on staff that are also liaisoning with them. Nice. So it's really whoever's most comfortable. It's interesting because I was listening to one of your podcasts, and, some dealers are deeply involved in an artist's practice.
Yes. And
I was always involved, but I didn't want to dictate what to make. Like, I wouldn't be like, well, 36-inch round, mirrors are selling, so you need to start cranking out 30. It's not who I was. And because of your podcast, I was actually talking to some artists, and I was like, do you need me to be more involved in that aspect of things? And what surprised me was a lot of them said, yeah, I'd like to hear that. And I was like, okay. They're like, I could say no, but I'd be more curious. And that wasn't me. I was always like, I don't want to impede on somebody's artistic, vision. Just, I think, and I still don't to a certain level, because I do think that it muddies it.
You have to imagine, when you're in your studio, you have, sometimes you have a team, sometimes you don't, but you don't have a lot of feedback, when you're in the shop and, working on stuff. So I think your gallerists can be that voice, of that kind of outside view that you crave, I think, as an artist. You want to hear. And then also, I mean, obviously people know when sales are going well in a certain direction, it's like, okay, well, that thing seems to sell well. But you on that case you're not like, hey, this is doing really well, let's just keep making these things, right?
No way. It's just not who I am,
right.
Because what's the fun in that? What's the how are you growing as an artist if you're just cranking out stuff for sales?
Well, there's an argument that, if you're going to contribute something to the industry, the design world, right? Design history, let's say, right? Prouvé chair is that chair is that chair, right?
It is.
So, we live in a hyperspeed world, so it seems like we should be growing like that. But if someone can make a contribution in that, Wendell Castle is kind of like that. You know what I mean? He very focused on very particular forms, and
he made so many different things.
He did. But
historically, from some stuff that in his own voice, he would say were absolutely god awful, but other things were pretty amazing. Then he got into robotics, and
right.
So I look at both the gallery and being an artist, as a process, and one thing grows upon something else. Mm-hmm. So,
no, it's true.
And there's two ways to think about this. There's like you said, like the Prouvé chair. Where this is great.
Yeah,
let's crank,
and they're going to sell for the rest of time.
Right. Let's crank these out. They're going to sell for the rest of time. Even though Prouvé is not really like a art.
No, you're right. You're right. That's true. But yeah,
I think when you're getting into collectible design in the way that somebody like Mark Bender thinks about it, where it's almost like an offshoot of contemporary art, it's different than a Prouvé.
Yes, of course.
And
but the artists that you're working with now, they're very much in the collectible.
They're a little bit of both. Like Nick Missel is still kind of, he's
an artist,
more of an artist.
He's a sculptor that is playing in the furniture world. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's kind of, so I guess it's really a case by case basis. Marcus is, I like to say, if James Turrell, Noguchi,
yes,
and Daniel Judd had a baby, it would be Marcus.
Yes.
So Marcus is playing in that
maybe a little Anish Kapoor.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
But that's our sweet spot as a gallery, I think.
Yeah.
He can be comfortable in both worlds. Like when I met him through you at a show that you curated, and we tried to sign him then, and he wasn't ready because he was really set on being a fine artist.
Right. Doing the resin pieces. No?
Yeah. And also the stone too, with neon actually. And he was showing in a contemporary art gallery in Chelsea that, went under, and then he, he didn't have the representation, and then we reconnected. But I think he's a great example of somebody who, given, however you market him, would be comfortable in either world. But I do feel that the feedback and the response to his work in the collectible design world has been pretty tremendous. So I think, he's probably, in my view, more comfortable. I don't know what his view is, but I think in my view, he's more comfortable in this world. And that's what you run into with artists too. Sometimes young ones, they're not sure who they are yet and where they want to be. And I think everybody usually wants to gravitate in that mindset in the contemporary art world, because they think it's more money, it's more glamour, it's more prestige, it's all those things. And I think slowly a lot of people are realizing, you know what, I could be a small fish in that big pond, or no fish at all, or I can be kind of a bigger fish in the collectible design world, and I'm comfortable there, and people are responding to the work.
Right.
So I think that
this ties back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, where if there was a more robust secondary market, I think that we wouldn't have that that pull to want to be in the contemporary art world as much.
I agree. I think the problem with the collectible design world and the auction world and secondary market world is, I think the reason why the contemporary art world is where it is in a lot of ways is because the primary dealers will buy their work or bid their work up on the secondary market. And I don't think that's happening in the collectible design world. So you're letting things that somebody bought for, let's say, $50,000 sell for $30,000 or $20,000 or even $10,000. And
it's shocking to see the primary market prices and then see the auction prices of collectible design, like say at Wright, at that auction house.
Yep.
It's abysmal in a lot of ways because no one's paying those prices. It's almost like it's a better deal to go to the auctions and buy the works but I'm starting to see a momentum there. At least, there's some contemporary names, some really ultra contemporary names being sold, not at like huge record prices, but they're selling. So I see that there's a slight shift happening. And I think that's how it begins. I mean,
it's such an early young field.
Right.
That even the fact that there is a secondary market is pretty remarkable. I mean,
yeah.
So yeah, it's like anything. It's going to take time.
Right.
And as long as, the dealers are supportive and there's interest, I think that market is, secondary market's going to shift and there's going to be, a change and the price structure is going to change. I mean, you look at Lalonde, for example,
Yeah.
or even, somebody who's near and dear to my heart and who I deal in, ferociously, Judy McKee.
Oh, yeah.
So here's somebody who, when
Those pieces are great.
I
Good.
Love that work.
Yeah.
When she was selling, it was $20,000. I mean, I never got to represent her because she only worked with 2 dealers.
Okay.
But I was always dealing on the secondary market with her work because I've always loved it. So I've been showing it forever.
Right.
I mean, they were like $14,000, $8,000, $20,000, and now they're well into the 6 figures. It took time though.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're going to see with collectible design.
Seems like you're pretty well positioned to kind of, navigate that when that starts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And if I had more, revenue, I'd be buying a lot of the work
You would?
now. But that takes capital that I just don't have. And I've never had investors, and it's always
never have. Okay, cool.
No.
You guys
So
have done
just
this all on your own.
All on our own,
Well, let's talk about this museum that you opened, which I think is phenomenal. So in 2023, you guys opened this Flagship in Fishtown.
Yep.
11,500 square feet. That's what's been said. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
You got 35-foot ceilings. I mean, one, what does that feel like? I mean, it must feel like a major accomplishment. It was an old Petzl factory, right?
Yep.
And how does it change your program? Because now, that is a ambitious space. The artist must feel like, wow, Marcus's show literally looks like a museum show in there, right? So just tell me about the, arriving here and what it's like to now run this gargantuan thing. Yeah.
So yeah,
you guys own it too, right?
Yeah, we own the building.
Nice.
So what happened was basically, we were 20 some odd years in Old City, holding that corner there.
Yeah.
And, and it was great. I knew everybody. It was comfortable. But, I was in my late 50s, and I said to Sherri, my wife, okay, I'd like to slow down a little bit. And she somehow interpreted that as, let's buy a giant building, completely gut renovate it, and you'll be working for the rest of your life. And where it got lost in translation, I do not know. But, I mean, seriously, but we figured out that, when we looked at galleries, the only way a lot of galleries make money is when they eventually sell their building.
Yeah.
And we looked at it as, partially as an investment in real estate, and partially we wanted to create this incredible space to showcase our artists' work. So, we searched for a long time for a building, and we kept losing out to New York developers because Philadelphia has kind of become a little bit of a hot market because New York's gotten so expensive that a lot of people are moving out of New York and they're coming to Philly. And then we found this space. We got it. We lost it to a developer. They then backed out and then came back to us, and then we wound up with the building.
No way. Wow.
And yeah, the idea of those 35-foot high ceilings in that atrium was we could show work from the floor up or from the ceiling down.
Right.
And there's no sub-basement, so there's no restrictions as far as weight goes. And we can do museum quality shows and become really a showcase for our artists and allow them to do things that, they probably couldn't in their wildest dreams think of doing, like showing Titan at Marcus's show right now.
Huge piece.
Yeah, huge piece. And that was the reasoning behind it. And then, we did even Jomo's show, which was literally a museum show.
Yeah, it felt like a museum show, honestly. Yeah.
I mean, and that's what we're doing now. We're doing shows that go beyond just mere commerce, but really highlight the work in an environment where it needs to be highlighted.
Does probably people in town, do they think it's a commercial gallery space? Or do they?
People in town have no idea what the hell is going on.
Okay, because it feels like you'd walk by and think, okay, that's a museum, and I just wonder if it complicates the message for some people. But I don't know if those are the people that you're trying to sell to anyway.
I mean, the truth of the matter is they're not the people that we're trying to sell to. But for me, the highlight is when somebody comes in and they get past what they feel is like the because you have to buzz in.
Okay. Oh, right. I got you.
And people are intimidated by that.
Yes.
And then they come in and then they meet me or somebody who works for me, but mostly, I like doing it. And I show them around and we go into details and we discuss things and I get their opinions. And, it's an education process. That for me is
just as fun as selling
more gratifying.
More gratifying, yeah. I used to have that when people would walk up my studio in Brooklyn, they would peek their head in and they'd just be walking by and I would walk them through the shop and be like, listen, this is what we're doing, because they'd be like, this is wild. What is this doing out here? It's fun.
It's the best.
Just as much as walking a client through or whatever.
The highlight of my career, people ask me, so what's the highlight of your career? The highlight of my career is when we were doing the gallery in Old City and we were making it, and there was a drywall guy and an electrician that stayed a little late, and it was a Truly show. That was the first show we opened up with the gallery. And I'm showing them around and they're genuinely interested. And the next day the electrician calls me up and says, I was watching TV with my wife when we were going through the channels and we saw your guy. I'm like, what guy? He said, we saw Chihuly. It was a show on PBS and it was Chihuly in Venice. So we started watching and my wife was so impressed that I knew so much about the artist. That's the highlight for me because here I am taking somebody who would never be exposed to this work or unlikely that they would be. And they loved it. They actually took the time to watch it and they relayed what they learned to their wife. That's incredible. Yeah. And it's almost full circle for me because it's almost like when I started at Christie's and I didn't know anything. And I turned around and, this kid from Long Island that now, is here playing it back. Those are the highlights for me.
So this show that you have up now it just opened recently, right?
Yeah.
And it's his first major exhibition. Are you so because of the presentation of it, is it like, are you trying to sell to interior designers? Are you really trying to focus this on museum on museum collections, like you had said earlier, or what's the approach with someone young like him that's really just getting started?
Well, the answer to your question is yes. We try to approach literally, everybody. So the pieces that we've sold so far have mostly been to collectors. Which has been great.
That is great.
And that seems to be where most of the interest is.
Interesting. Cool.
We're working on getting a curator from the PMA to come in and do a discussion with Marcus, on the work, and you have to come to see that. So I think, it's outreach to museums. We even did an outreach to, this is how we think. Mm-hmm. So, because Marcus's work is also kind of based a lot on, space, because his father is a,
Mars and worked for NASA.
Yeah. Yeah. So we reached out to, we did some research, found out who were the new minted millionaires from the SpaceX
no way.
stock. and and
That was good.
and reached out to, or in the process of reaching out to them before, we got those names right away. So before they become, hard
Sure.
to locate through LinkedIn and some other things.
That is brilliant.
But that's how we think, and that actually came from Marcus. But
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that's what we do. There's a conversation and a dialogue, and then our job is to execute. So yeah, that's just how we work. So yeah.
How many shows a year are you guys going to do at the gallery? Or are you
it's like one every 2 to 3 months, I guess. And then, the space in New York is more like in situ.
Right. That feels like, it's more for...
because that's more for the trade, I guess,
right.
And interior designers. And that's also been fascinating too, because back when I started, interior designers were not involved in this world as much.
Oh, really?
They weren't gatekeepers like they are now.
Wow, they are the gatekeepers.
They are the gatekeepers,
yes.
But it used to be collectors, and they were the ones buying the work, not necessarily the interior designers. And now it's kind of done this move where they have become the gatekeepers of our community.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, I know. I always we think about a lot. I think a lot about that because we hear about collectors, but you think, well, they're usually behind. Like, I'll find out that a collector owns my work, but I had no idea because I sold it through the interior design firm. And then somebody say, "Oh, I saw it at certain person's house." I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know they owned it." And it's like a big time collector. And I think, "Oh, wow, that's crazy." That you don't know.
And it's also crazy because, the separation now. So you as an artist, now you're still working. So a lot of times you're working sometimes directly with clients.
Yes.
But as a dealer, so now I'm taking the artist's work, and so they're one removed through me. And now I'm going to the interior designer or the art consultant. So now I'm one removed. And then finally it's going to the buyer.
Client, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers in between.
There's a lot of layers.
Yeah, I know. And partially that was kind of the idea in the art world. The galleries love those degrees of separation because they really want to keep the artists away from selling their own work or direct to clients. And, they've kind of created that buffer to make sure that.
And I don't mind a buffer to a certain extent, but now it's gotten. Yeah,
it's kind of crazy. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And also because, in art, a lot of it's not commission based.
Right.
So it becomes even more tricky to navigate when it's a commission. And then you've got,
right.
these layers.
Yeah. Right. Because then you got someone else making and then they send you a message and you have to make an iteration of, it's crazy. I've had those telephone kind of situations.
Yeah. And what we do, in a lot of instances is, we just say, hey, keep us in the chain, but the two of you need to speak directly because this is just, this doesn't make any sense. And then, do you run the risk that the artist is going to wind up collecting those names? And if they decide to go out on their own,
right,
then they have the clients. Yeah, that's the risk you take, but I trust my people.
Of course. So what does Wexler Gallery look like for the next, foreseeable future, 5 years? Or how far out do you think? I know you love to think about a lot of things at one time, but
that's a great question. I think I'd love to see us engage more in the community. And
in Philadelphia?
In Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah. Anywhere, but just, less sales driven on a certain level and a lot more community driven too. You need both obviously because, I got.
But your collectors are not there, right? Or
no, they used to be. And then the middle market kind of disappeared. So they're all over the world now. They're literally all over the world. Right. And the game has changed from
why do you want the connection with the community? It seems obvious, but maybe explain why that is.
Because it'll feel good.
Okay.
I've done so much in my career, and I've what brings me joy is that story that I told you. So why not make that more of my story? So I think the future of Wexler is more of that. mentoring a little bit. I was very lucky in my life to have, like I said, Tony DiLorenzo, and oh my God, why am I losing names now? Nancy McClelland and Barry Friedman,
Oh, you knew. Oh,
Barry and I are, close.
Cool.
In fact, I wrote an essay for his catalog for Christie's when he was selling, his collection,
Nice.
which was a real honor for me. And at one point, actually, Barry wanted me to take over his gallery in New York.
So it would have been, it would have been Friedman Wexler.
Well, he was already, he already had, Mark, and they were doing their thing. And then he wanted me to take over the, Barry Friedman Gallery. And my wife was not real keen on that. And she was right, because she said,
it will always be under his name, umbrella, whatever. Yeah.
No, it was more about the fact that, I'd have to commute from Philadelphia to New York and back and forth.
Oh.
And that's the one thing about the gallery and, us in particular, is I think I could have been an even more successful dealer. But what comes first and foremost for me is my family and my kids. And, maybe the artists don't want to hear this, but the gallery is always going to be second to that, no matter what. I was fortunate enough to deal with incredibly, successful people in my life. And every one of them, almost to a person, would say, my one regret was I didn't spend enough time with my family.
Yep.
And I never wanted to be that guy. Sometimes I was more successful at it than others. But, that to this day is the most important thing to me. And we're lucky that we have two wonderful kids, and a marriage that lasted 31 years.
Yeah, that's
so far and
these
going.
days.
Yeah. So, and because I just met your beautiful wife, and you guys are a partnership as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We work together, and it's great.
Let me ask you a question. So where do you see your work going? Where do you see your...
Well, I think I've already announced, but I'll be opening my first major solo show in New York in October 8th of this year.
October 8th. Okay, I will be there.
Yes.
And
with Christina Grahalis.
You picked a great person.
She followed my work even through my hardcore independence. She followed my work and we built a friendship over 5 years that felt very genuine to me. And she's just a very kind, authentic person in this world that can be a little bit, I don't know. It doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah.
And, I feel like it's time for me to kind of like come out with new work. And so I've been this entire year been making all new works, and we haven't shown anything, not even sneak peeks, no behind the scenes or anything. So I'm really excited to kind of relaunch and a new era for me, because gallery representation after being independent is a massive shift.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for you a little bit, because it's giving up control, and that's a hard thing.
I think that I can do it because I feel like I feel safe in my career to be able to do it, and I'm willing to give up the control.
Right. Yeah, and early when I first met you,
I was not.
No way. Yeah,
I know. And I made it clear to a lot of people, and I got announced that in a lot of ways, because I had a lot of attention to do certain things, do certain shows, but I just was kind of staunch around that. And I don't know if that was the best thing or not, but that's my path. And now I'm at this new era where I kind of want to, like you said, you wanted to slow down a little bit.
Right.
I don't know if I'm slowing down or not, but this was my idea, by not having to manage, a studio like I did,
Yeah.
And so, this opens up that where I can be in the studio making and have someone else be responsible for trying to, move this stuff.
Yeah. The challenge is, though, you're making, work for a show, and it's all spec. So it's a little scary too, because there's a risk involved in that as well. And that's frightening.
Yeah.
And I think about that whenever I'm showing an artist's work.
But I will say I'm so excited about this work that I'm not as fearful about, I think it's out there. It's really, I think, the best work I've ever made. It has to be. I mean,
Right.
I'm at the top. My craft has gotten really refined over the last, 10 to 12 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, and you have to build a foundation before you build the house.
That's right.
And you've got a very, very, very solid foundation now. So I do think, the timing is perfect for you.
Thank you.
And you picked a great dealer to show the work.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a really smart move for you. The challenges I run into, especially like sometimes when I do represent young artists, like, when they first start out, is
They don't have that foundation.
sometimes they're not ready for it yet.
That's right.
And sometimes they're like, I can't do this because it's just beyond what I'm capable of, and I need to figure myself out before
That's right.
I can do this. And sometimes you do. You get them too early. So I think it's really smart that you waited and are secure in who you are as both an artist and a person. And that's the right timing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of that is it. I waited, but I feel good about the decision now. Yeah, and I feel like I'm very happy about the decision.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited for
you.
it.
Yeah, and so, but it is it is going to be nerve-wracking to open this show in October and kind of like show people my newest thoughts about the world. Yeah, because a very conceptually motivated show. Very conceptual.
So you feel like it's kind of your next level?
It is. No doubt it's the next level for me, yeah. And also the craftsmanship of what we're trying to execute. I mean, we're doing, my use of materials is exotic, but this is like me pushing that to like, a degree where I'm having to like remake works because I'm not fully happy with them. I'm like really pushing them to just be that they're high level. Yeah.
And I bet you it's exciting for you.
Oh my God!
Because
I can tell my wife. I'm like, dude, I don't want to work on my commissions anymore. I just want to focus on these.
And that's what makes it. That when that's getting back to like telling an artist make a 36-inch round mirror. I think you lose that
1,000%.
That incredible
and I
passion.
can absolutely back that up. That I know what that feels like, and that's very true. And that's something that people talk about a lot, but that is very true that happens. And you can get sucked into that, but you got to push yourself out and explore new areas.
Yeah, because you're growing.
Yes.
And that's the only way you grow. I mean, that's kind of, I guess, why the gallery is taking so many turns and moves in different areas. It's because that's how. I feel we grow as a gallery too. And I grow and Sherri grows as people because,
that's right.
You're pushing boundaries. That's probably why we wound up with this building. Because it's once again, boundary pushing. And Tony told me, way back when, and I wish I would have listened to him more closely. If you're not going to gamble on yourself, then who are you going to gamble on?
Tony didn't tell me that, but I heard that along the way. That the best investment you can make is in yourself. And I truly believe that. Yeah. And I always did that.
And now you're doing it to the next level.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
No, I'm excited.
I can't wait to see the work.
I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to like it. It's wild. It's wild. So look, last question here. You said that you and Sherri buy something new every anniversary. That's what I read in Collect.
Yeah.
In terms of you, like, because you started by buying African Mask, I think.
That was like our first thing, and that was on the cover of Art and Antiques magazine with me holding the mask, and it said "Young Fearless Collectors." Yeah, that's not the case anymore.
What do you guys buy nowadays?
I mean,
are you guys still collecting?
I mean, I wouldn't even call us collectors. You probably have heard this all the time. We buy what we love.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Well, actually, the last thing that I bought, this wasn't something we bought together, was a little drawing from Nancy McClellan's collection.
Oh, no way.
Because Nancy passed away.
Full circle.
And Stereo Gallery had her
cool.
collection.
Up in Hudson?
Yeah, up in Hudson. In fact, I was going to ask you to bring it with you if
no
you
shit.
could. But
it's
still sitting there. And
I can grab it for you.
I just wanted something from her because she's such an important part of my history.
That's cool.
So that was the last thing that I bought. But I mean, really what we buy together, it's so broad, but I mean, we do love photography. So we are kind of a little bit of photography collectors, mostly portraits of artists because we can't afford the artists themselves. So we buy their portraits.
Nice.
And sometimes, folk art.
Do you collect your designers? Ish.
Not No, not usually. I'll be honest, because I see them all the time.
Yeah.
And
look, I don't really have a lot of my work in my home. It's funny.
And also, we can't afford it probably, right? I mean, that's part of the deal.
That's probably true. Like, I got to pay for that. Yeah.
But, I've been very fortunate that a lot of artists have given me, their
cool.
work as gifts. So they're throughout my entire house.
Nice.
But, we just really buy what we love. And,
cool.
We do have some like prized possessions, like James Van Gogh portrait of Jean-Michel Basquiat with the Siamese cat,
Cool.
And then we're fortunate enough, we have a Joe Colombo Elder chair, and we have a Prouvé desk and standard chair.
Wow.
And, we have some pretty wonderful pieces. But we're not, I don't know what we are. We buy what we love. And that's really, at the end of the day, what it is. I think what's interesting is Sherri, like a lot of people now, is more interested in experiences than owning objects. And I think that's also where the market's changed for the general public. People, certain people like her would rather go to, let's say, Costa Rica or go to Oaxaca or experience the world than maybe own a particular own objects where, we've got so much. And I think that's where we differ, because
you'd rather
love stuff.
You love stuff.
Like I'm looking at your watch, and I love watches, but I'm slowly learning in my older age now that my son and I do a lot of fly fishing, that, like we took a trip to Alaska. That was pretty amazing. And we're looking at Montana now. So you can't do everything. So I'm learning in my older age that, it's great to have objects and they enrich your life. And that's why we do this, because it enriches our lives, other people's lives. But sometimes, you need to say,
and having experiences.
Exactly. So it's all balance, and life is just a total balance.
Well, I hope I've graduated to calling you Lou. I agree.
Dude, of course, we've known each other.
I know we have, but
for such a long time.
I've never called you Lou. I didn't know I would call you Lou. Thank you so much for doing this. This was cool.
Beyond my pleasure. And like I said, I am really looking forward to seeing the new work. I'm really excited for you. And we'll do this. And, maybe you and your wife and me and Sherri, when you come to see Marcus's show.
Please. Yeah. We'll come.
1811 Frankfurt Avenue. That's
please.
Shameless plug.
No, come on.
We'll have some dinner or something. That'd be great.
I love that.
I'll take you to Soraya.
I've heard, the Thai place that
Kalaya. I'll take you there.
Yes.
I was just there 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Everyone says that
All
place
right,
is
so
a bomb.
this is a date. I'm taking you and your wife for dinner there. Just give me a date so I can make the reservation in advance. And this has been my pleasure. So
how long is the show up?
It's up for 2 months or 3 months, something like that.
Perfect.
Yeah, once again, they just push me in a direction and I go. I don't look at dates or anything. I just keep moving forward. Awesome. So it's a great show. And once again, thank you, because
this is awesome.
I wouldn't have had that show if it wasn't for you.
Well, I appreciate that. All right, man. Thank you. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. I know none of you guys are listening to this. I know you guys all turned down at the end. I see it on my analytics. So, but if you are, I appreciate you listening this far, and maybe you'll send it to some friends and say, hey, listen to this podcast because it's really great. So, because we want more subscribers, more listeners, because it's good for us. So get on there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. So anyway, I'll see you next time on Design Discord. Bye-bye.